Live from the mighty Plutopia verse. This is Plutopia Live. I'm Scoop Sweeney. He's John Lebka. I can't even say. He's John Lebkowski, and she is the corporate mystic. Are you mystified or mystique?
Uh-oh.
I do mystify, and sometimes I am mystified. I come across some quite perplexing things at times.
Well, I'm mystified at the fact I've been working with John. Well, I've known John since third grade, and I still stumble on his last name. I'm sure that's never happened to John from anyone else. Everyone always gets it right, John, right?
Right.
Now I want to say it. John
Liar.
Lebkowski. Is it John Lebkowski?
Lebkowski is what we
Lebkowski.
always
Okay.
said it,
Okay.
yeah.
No, that's
If you,
good. It helps
yeah, if
me.
you look on his website and on his Facebook, he actually spells it out how to
And
pronounce his name.
he puts the linguistics so that you can actually see. So, well, thanks, guys. It's nice to be on the show as the corporate mystic and talking to you about some mysticism.
Well, it shows that we are streaming to YouTube, but I cannot find us on YouTube.
Sometimes it takes a while for them to catch up.
Well, I'm not sure that's what's going on. So you guys continue, and I will try to find out what's going on here.
Okay. I was just looking on. Oh, it just shows that we're live.
It does show that we're live.
Anyway.
Well, we are alive. I
Oh.
mean, let's all take a moment and be grateful for that. We are alive.
We are alive, yes.
Well, Ms. Mystic, you have the Book of Answers. Ask the Book of Answers. Are we live?
Are we live? The Book of Answers. The Book of Answers would tell us that we should probably know that.
We should, but I'm actually.
You know what it says? It says, get it in writing.
Now that is wisdom, right?
It wants proof.
Yeah. For some reason, I'm looking on YouTube also. It shows that we're live, but it just shows the Plutopia logo for some reason.
Well, I've got us now. I can see it.
Oh, good.
Maybe it's just a little technology lag.
I'm looking to see.
We're always lagging a little bit here.
Well, it's mysterious, It's a mysterious thing with YouTube. It shows me in one context, it'll show me that the video is private.
There we
but
are.
Where I'm looking at it now, we appear to be public.
Yeah.
It's like meta. I see myself on the screen, looking at myself on the screen.
Oh, there you are. Meta indeed. But we have the corporate mystics, so maybe you can churn up some mysticism to make sure we always are perfectly have it together in the technology sphere.
If only I had that level of energetic power, I could actually rule the world. That would be.
I could get you a lot of gigs for sure.
I could get myself gigs with that power. No, I try to channel my mysticism for good, and that would be good. It would be good if I had that level of power. I do work with energy quite a bit in corporate spaces, but not so much the technical nature specifically.
So what does it mean to work with energy?
Yeah, it's really interesting. What I really work with is helping to develop emotional intelligence in corporate spaces. And so when I think about energy in a corporate environment, I think about does this environment have a low vibration or a high vibration? And it meaning, does it feel toxic? Does it feel like it's fear-based? Does it feel, oppressed or what, even just disrupted in some particular way? Or, does it hum? Does it have, sort of like a synergy to it? Does the culture seem to be organic and connected? And do the people that are there, are they connected into that purpose? And do they feel valued? Do they feel like they're valued and do they value what they do? So when I look at things energetically, I'm sort of, when I speak about that, that's kind of what I'm talking about, is sort of, how do things flow? And I mean it pretty literally though. I really look at it from that concept of pure energy. What are we putting out? What are we expressing into our environments?
When you look at American business, the corporate world, the corporate intelligence seems to be an oxymoron. There doesn't seem to be a lot present in a lot of the things that are happening right now. So with some of the big players, the really, the multi-billionaire control players don't really seem to be concentrating on intelligence. It's more of power and greed.
That's
How do you
true.
overcome that?
It is true. And I think it's a real misnomer for like the typical business person. I can follow up with all my sources. So if I get misquoted, let me know. But I read I believe it was a Gallup poll that came out very recently that said US companies are losing 1 billion, that's capital B, $1 billion annually in employee turnover. Employees being dissatisfied and leaving. That's 1 billion. So for a billionaire, that may or may not matter to them. That might not be a real value, but for the average company, they broke it down to like an average company, I want to say of like 500 people. Based on these numbers, it's costing them over $2 million a year. It's a significant cost to a small business to not care about this. So while certain, really big boss billionaire guys can probably get away with doing whatever they want with their businesses, real businesses and real people who are trying to run real businesses are going to have to adapt to the shifting culture that is happening. And it is shifting rapidly. I mean, it's already new businesses that are starting by young people look very, very, very different than what I would say like traditional businesses that we're used to.
With the explosion of remote working, that seemed to really change the way business was done, and it's also caused a lot of problems with the the corporations that now want everyone back in the office. So it's really hard to make a decision. Is that good? Is that bad? I guess it kind of depends on their business.
I think it's a real struggle for businesses for a variety of reasons. I don't necessarily believe that it should just be an automatic sort of black or white decision. I think it really, like you said, it kind of depends on the business. It also depends on the culture, but I think it depends on the need as well. And so bringing people back into the office simply for the sake of doing that in what I would feel like is sort of like a fear-based or punitive way, I don't think that's a win situation for anybody. I think that you're going to create a dynamic there, a dynamic of tension, that you're just going to create that hostility and resentment. I think that there are some businesses who are figuring out how to do it right. And it may even be on a case-by-case basis. Honestly, there are some employees who really want to go into office spaces. They really do actually value collaboration and community and, getting work done in certain ways. So it's not just such a clear-cut issue of being like, well, everybody wants to stay home. There's a lot to consider. And I think it's a big challenge for businesses to have to work through that and figure out, what's right for their culture. But I don't think that the ones that are just being kind of authoritative and demanding it out of fear, I really don't think that they are going about it the right way. I think they're sort of missing the bigger opportunity, really.
Whoop, I forgot to unmute there. When I was working in IT in California, that was in the time when we transitioned from having staffing in this big IT operation of people that had been at it for a long time, and they knew everything about everything that was going on. And all of a sudden, there was outsourcing, overseas outsourcing, and suddenly we lost all the people that built all of this stuff, and we're trying to say, well, just let these people who are working for a third of what the original people were making, let them figure it out. And the impact of that was just like, oh God, we're going to die. And a lot of companies did die.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and there were a lot of reasons for that, right? It's like, again, when companies are working from a value space, and they really have truly activated values, not just sort of stated on paper bullshit values, but they really identify their values and then they act on those values. And you can see that, you know, and there are certain organizations that do that better than others. Those companies, you know, like in a situation like that, that might not ever happen, but if it aligned with their values and it fit into the culture, it would be a much smoother transition. Like in what you described in those situations, everybody was looking at the bottom line. They were seeing like a quick, cheap, easy, like, oh, wow, look at this plethora of talent that we can access and, you know, cut off, you know, 2/3 of our staffing budget, you know, and they're overlooking the value of wisdom, of loyalty to their employees that have like built the organization, of taking care of their people. I mean, there's a whole bunch of values that get wrapped up in that decision that, you know, again, they're stepping over. I call it like you're stepping over dollars to pick up dimes, because you're missing the real deep value in having that employee. It costs 2.5 times an employee's actual, you know, whatever their salary is. Like on average, it costs 2.5 times that employee's salary to replace that person. So it's an extreme. And then when you're talking about that level of expertise in an organization, to try to like downplay that and replace that, you're losing out on so much intellectual capital even. And again, these decisions are made in very knee-jerk reactive ways. You know, they tend to be made and they're not really very mindful, thoughtful decisions. They're based typically on bottom line. They're usually being driven by, you know, traditional corporate capitalism, which is fine until it stops working and it starts working against the business owner. And we're seeing that happen right now as we see like major cultural shifts with employees really being more empowered than the employer right now, you know, and that's going to continue to have. We've seen like massive strikes happening. I mean, bigger than we've ever seen before and more collective than we've ever seen before, you know, and these types of events they're not going to stop. People are going to continue to assess their own value systems, and they're going to look at the organizations that they're dealing with and they're going to assess theirs.
Well, the healthcare industry seems to be really, you know, massively impacted by staffing. I've been experiencing that with, you know, my wife is disabled and she gets physical therapy, home health physical therapy, a couple of days a week. And for a while now, we don't know if they're going to show up or not. And they have kind of admitted, well, we don't have the people to do what needs to be done, because no one wants to pay what people want to be paid in that kind of a job. Healthcare jobs are demanding, you know.
Absolutely.
I
Emotionally, physically, everything, mentally.
Yeah.
I mean, they're highly demanding jobs.
Yeah, I worked for a big healthcare provider. I was in IT, but I knew all the people on the medical side, and the stuff they didn't have they couldn't just say, well, screw it, I'm just going to go home. You know, if they're dealing with someone who's, you know, in serious medical problem is, you know, impacting their life, they can't just walk away and say, well, I'll screw it. So the pressure of that, saying, well, I want to be paid more and they don't want to pay me more and I want to leave, but if I do, then who's going to care for these people? So
it's
the impact is
tremendously
terrible.
damaging, and it damages our society. And this is part of the issue with creating such toxic culture. So when you're talking about the healthcare system, well, you have these insurance companies that make unbelievable profits. You know, like I've worked in the insurance industry, I've worked in financial services. They are making unbelievable profits. And then on the flip side, you have an average individual who, you know, I very recently experienced somebody who's very close to me nearly died because they avoided going to the doctor because they are conditioned to think like, oh, this is going to be too expensive. I can't take time off work. I can't, you know, take care of myself because it's going to screw up my life. And they're not even recognizing, you know, they're too, in this case, you know, too really not experienced enough and not enough self-agency to sort of recognize like, no, you can't ignore your health based on these other issues, but we have a healthcare system that really doesn't support the healthcare needs of the people. And so this gets into bigger social values even, because I have had significant reliance on our healthcare system and value the nurses and doctors who have literally kept me alive, and they deserve to be paid fair wages, like literally whatever we determine that is. But we need to take into consideration the cost of their diminished, again, mental health, physical health, like the strain on their systems and their bodies to do this care. There's a cost to that, and we should be supporting these things instead of looking at them as overhead, which is what happens. We bottom line everything. And so value systems and businesses don't really they get talked about. Like if you go into any hospital, they're going to tell you health is important. They're going to have some stated values about, healthcare and patients and life. But at the end of the day, are they actually able to activate and mechanize those values? And when we see entire nursing groups, and Ascension goes on strike every other month, that affects our community. It affects those individuals and their families. It affects people, like you and your family. I mean, everybody's affected by that. And so we have to at some point decide, like, where are our value systems here? And where are the costs? What are the real costs? Because like I said, when you look at the $1 billion a year of employee turnover, that's sort of it's sort of a hidden, it's a real cost and people feel it, but it doesn't really get elevated in the right way. And so we can devalue or diminish the impact of that cost, even though it's huge. And that's part of the problem, is that we're just very conditioned to sort of look at the wrong side of the coin.
Well, the whole impact of labor issue, the labor movement is starting to try and make a comeback. The unions have, are trying to organize in certain businesses, and the medical care unions. I had some experience with them back in the 1970s when unions were still a big thing. I was a shop steward and organizer for the office workers union in Oakland, and that was for the medical care provider that I ended up working for a long time. But I started out as a bottom of the rung worker, and I heard the things that people were experiencing, people who were good workers, hard workers, and they had people who really didn't care. They would they had managers showing up, and they were going out at lunch and getting drunk and coming back and being abusive to people who were just trying to make a living. And you're seeing a lot of that happen now with places like Starbucks and fast food places are really starting to feel the need to organize, simply because it's not an easy life having to do that kind of work. I had lots of friends who worked their way through college, in fast food, and they were just, telling horror stories. And you still hear the same horror stories today.
Really, it comes down to functionally like respecting people and humanity. And as a man in my world, I've worked in leadership and executive leadership in different capacities for different industries. And it's always been critically important to me that the people that I am responsible for, so to speak, because I don't really like to use the word manager when it comes to people. My perspective is you do not manage people, you manage things. You manage time, you manage projects, you manage processes, you manage, but people to me is more relational. And my perspective is you should lead people. You should be there in that space of leading with integrity, helping to develop them, because in my experience, whenever my employees were nurtured and developed and treated with respect and treated like they were actual adults who knew how to manage their own lives, they produced exceptionally, and it didn't matter what their age was. It didn't matter what generation they were in. It really just came down to having very open, trusting relationships with people that were very direct. I'm a very direct person. Nobody's ever going to tell you that I am like easy or soft, so to speak. Like if I think that something's fucked up, I'm going to say something's fucked up. But I'm not going to say it in a way that I am diminishing or demeaning anybody. And ultimately, as a leader, I'm going to take responsibility for whatever that is, period. And then I'm going to coach an employee if that's needed. At the end of the day, usually when something is like fucked up or screwed up in an employment situation, it really does come down to a process or an issue or something that's being tolerated that shouldn't be. And that is when we get into toxic environments, is when you have that manager that goes and gets drunk at lunch and comes back and treats his employee like crap and is allowed to, because for whatever reason that type of behavior is tolerated. It's really becoming what I would call like very old school and dated. It's not going to fly anymore, and it's frustrating there's a lot of organizations because the conditioning around sort of this authoritative dictatorial leadership that I kind of align it to transitioning military aspects of leadership, which are very critical and important when you're going into a situation where lives are at risk and people are going to die. There is a certain type, I think, of leadership that is required, a certain type of discipline around that. And there's a certain, you need to be in survival mode if you're in war. There's no question about that. You absolutely need to be in survival mode. But do you need to be in survival mode if your marketing deadline isn't going to get hit? And do you need to be in survival mode every single day? Because your it's like what in our corporation, we have transitioned this sort of authoritarian style of leadership into corporate business where nobody is going to war for, to get a brochure out, nobody, to get a life insurance, like these things that we treat. There are certain jobs that are absolutely, we talk about nursing. It's like, I would venture to say that those jobs are exceptionally more critical than, say, some of the more frivolous kind of sales or consumer driven things that we have out there. It's like, and we value those exceptionally more. And so it's just an interesting way of looking both at our bigger social value system, but then when it comes into the corporate space, how those values get activated and expressed. I can't hear you. You're mute. There you go.
Muting. My experience in the corporate world was unique. That of all, I had a lot of different bosses. The ones that helped me grow and helped with whatever product or project I was involved with be successful, they were all women. And that didn't happen until about the late 70s. Women started being able to make inroads on the corporate structure. I got a woman who was very intelligent, but very personable, and she took over this department, and it was like a new world. I suddenly was able to relax and just do good work because there was no, bullshit going on of, well, I think you should do this way because I read it in the Wall Street Journal and that kind of thing. It's that, instead of asking, why I'm doing something, is well, that doesn't sound right. And, these are from people, men who just really didn't give a shit about the job. And I've experienced that, the women that I had as senior managers really got stuff done, and it was done in a humanistic manner. It was a more humane way of doing business.
Yeah. I mean, I think in a lot of ways it makes sense because women didn't get that kind of same conditioning all the way down to, men being told as young boys that, you can't cry or you're a sissy or whatever, like all of these sort of things that have, caused men to dissociate from their emotional, ability to kind of be emotionally responsive. And so, men don't, in a lot of cases, and especially I find in corporate environments, they don't want to be triggered because they're not prepared for it. There's a lot of rage. I have witnessed a man walk out of his office in a state of rage into another employee's, like a coworker's office, in a state of rage and physically attack him over a project. But it was his stress. He was having his own personal life stress. I mean, again, we pressure people, and without kind of that nurturing awareness, even, for just someone to be aware that there's this stress happening in the environment and that it can boil over. And so I think it makes sense that, women, we're not all nurturers. I don't think it's like black and white by any means, but I do think women do have less conditioning around repressing their emotions. And so it's just one of those things that they can bring to it's a strength, honestly, that they can bring to the table that's often mischaracterized as a weakness. That often, the women get overly emotional or they get too hysterical or whatever. But when women are able to sort of express that emotional responsiveness to people, I've talked to many senior executive women who they'll describe being a buffer for their team. They'll create like a bubble. And so they know that they're in a toxic space, but the environment, the small environment that they have created and nurtured, is sort of buffered by them protecting their team so that their team can get their job done. Really, and they effectively create more productive teams because, just like you said, you're able to relax, you're able to function, you're able to work, and they do get more shit done because they're doing that, but they're taking on a lot of physical and mental stress in the process. I have known a lot of women to burn out very quickly trying to live up to sort of that nurturing aspect of business in the corporate space because there's not a lot of buffer for them in that space.
One thing I experienced, what you just said reminded me of a project we were doing, and we had a big corporate meeting in Los Angeles, Pasadena actually, and we went down. It was like everybody in this whole big IT group was there, and I'd just been moved into a job as software supervisor for the whole revenue group, and there were people from other groups that were like, well, we're in the bar, and they're going, well, what did you do to get that? We think you've been sleeping with, I won't say her name, but my boss. I'm just like, what the hell is wrong with you? It's like, no, she gave me the job, and I'm glad I didn't have to sleep around to get the job. But you would hear that sort of thing going on, especially in bar get-togethers at corporate groups. And it's like, yeah, he's screwing her. That's the only reason he got that job, or the other way. The guy gives a woman a good job, and they think, well, she's sleeping with him. She slept away to the top, and that stuff just happens all the time. But usually it's just total bullshit.
It is beyond me to even attempt to express all of the different levels of misogyny that I have experienced, working in the corporate world. And it comes out in a variety of ways, everything from, being called honey and sweetheart to having people rub you on your lower back when they're talking to you it is just kind of a nonstop thing. And, in my world, I've always dealt with it very directly. I am a somewhat intimidating woman. I'm almost 6 feet tall, and I like to wear typically heels that are 4 to 5 inches. So I like to really tower over the people I'm around. Specifically, I like to look men directly in the eye or tower over them. And in the corporate space, that does afford me some authority. It really does. And I have accidentally, and I have PTSD. Right. And this is, I've had it my whole life, and I have startle response. And for many years in a corporate environment that was primarily male, men would love to walk up to me and grab me, on my ribs because I would scream. And then they would all laugh and they would think that that was really funny. And it wasn't really funny. It was actually really stressful. It created a lot of anxiety for me. And I tended to try to sit with my back against walls all the time. And I was in a situation one time where my back was not against a wall. And a man walked up behind me and he did that. And without even thinking, I went back. I probably broke his ribs. I went back so hard with my elbows. And he just seemed so offended. He was just like, I mean, I heard him. I know I did. Like, I really did. And he was like, why are you taking that so serious? And I'm like, why are you touching me? Like, why is it okay to touch? I was a senior executive. It wasn't even, it wasn't even like I was a higher rank than he was. And so it is that is, especially in certain industries, I think, which are more male dominated than others. But, people complain about Me Too and how complicated it made everything. But there's a reality to what many, many, many women have experienced for decades working in corporate environments. And, it's like, for me, I don't like work from a victim space. So, my world is always, let's change things and evolve them and, just call things directly as what they are. And sometimes people don't like that. So for me, that's okay. Everybody doesn't have to like me. But I definitely like see how over the years, especially in like what you described, that's been very prevalent. Like I've seen that throughout my entire career.
Well, I witnessed some of those corporate punch outs as well, of a guy told a coworker, well, you're just being that way because you're on your period. It's like, I thought he was going to lose his teeth.
I'd be like, so what if I am?
That was a dumb thing to say on any.
It's a terrible thing to say. And my response would be, you should be scared. Like, you should be scared. Like what? It's very frustrating in that regard. And it's like, but honestly, most people are, it's like, I'm an Aries rising. I'm extremely extroverted and I say what I want. And most women specifically are not really conditioned that way and don't really allow themselves sort of that vocal expression and that vocal authority. And I always have, and I've been called a lot of, lovely names that rhymes with things like itch and aunt and whatever. But it's like, I don't care about the people who project their own insecurities onto me. That's sort of how I look at men who act intimidated by me or however they respond to me. I have had enough strong, exceptionally productive corporate and professional relationships with men that I am so proud of, that I absolutely understand that what people project is really their own expression of weakness, their own fears, their own intimidation. And so when somebody's projecting like that onto me, they're literally telling me everything I need to know about who they are. And it makes it very easy to know how to deal with them. But that's why I coach people to sort of like help them figure. And I coach men and I enjoy coaching men almost more than women, because I believe that, with the culture shifts that have happened, men really are kind of caught in a rock and a hard place. They've been conditioned in a lot of ways. They haven't been taught a lot of skills, and they really haven't been given the permission to step into these spaces and truly express themselves. And so, I believe that the more men are able to kind of heal into that whole self space, it helps women heal. It helps all of us heal. I think that everybody has been damaged, so to speak, by the system that we're in right now. And it's an unsustainable system. It's making us all sick. It's breaking down, businesses are not able to sustain with it. And excuse me, socially, we struggle with it. So it does need to change. I'm going to mute and cough. Hold on one sec.
Okay, go ahead and cough. We allow that there. Cough break. Okay.
That was funny. A coffee break.
I have some Ricola lozenges here. I
give myself
I
so
will
worked
email
up.
them to you. But what you were talking about, women that haven't been able to escape that state of mind, I guess, that was imposed for hundreds of years, I suppose.
Yeah.
Yeah, I married a woman who's from your school of thought of I would be a fool to treat her with anything other than respect and on occasion fear. Yeah,
I lead from love. I do lead
yeah,
from love, but I can be scary.
yeah, yeah. When I met her, she worked for Kaiser Permanente as an accountant, and she was in the headquarters offices in Oakland, and I was as well. And we got married, and she was impressed by the music business stuff I did as my side gig, and she got involved in that and started dealing with musicians who were really, most rock and roll musicians are really sexist. They were then, and a lot of them are still that way.
I've met a lot of them. I have that
And
experience.
I enjoyed turning her loose because she would come in, ready to just move gear around just like the guys, and if they weren't going to help out, she would say, "What are you, a pussy or something? You can't help me with this heavy stuff." And these guys get all offended and embarrassed, and that's the way to deal. She had to deal with it. It's like get right in there, and so she was entering into an alien world to her because she hadn't been involved in that, and I'd been doing it off and on for a long time. But it was nice to see these guys learn their lessons. Like they started respecting women. It's like, wow, what's wrong with you? You're a musician, and you're respecting women.
Well, and it also helps, groupthink matters. So it helps if say one of the guys will respect women and can sort of model that behavior for the other guys who may or may not really know how to express that. And I don't make assumptions that these things are obvious. It's like a lot of people sort of are like they want to judge people for their behaviors and I do believe that people are absolutely accountable for their behavior. They're responsible for how they come across, but I don't make the assumptions about the why. So I don't just assume, for example, when I talk about toxic businesses, I always say nobody ever wakes up and is like, God, I'm going to start a toxic business. That's my dream. It's I'm there's maybe 6 guys, okay, that dream that. Okay. And then the rest of us are like, no, we really want to start a good company that's going to flourish and prosper. And, we have these visions that are, intentionally good. And so I don't believe that people, for example, grow up and say I want to be an asshole manager. I just want to be a dick and ruin everybody's day and make everybody hate me. I don't think that people set out with those intentions. I think people back into those behaviors because they really are, again, not given, in some cases, we have environments that nurture that type of toxicity and it creates, you have a toxic leader. So therefore he or she is going to bring people around them that are going to either support that toxicity or feed it in some way, nurture it in some way. So it's going to, again, bleed through the organization. And in those situations, yes, that's going to create a cycle and it's going to be very difficult to break that cycle. But I think a lot of times what happens is, people get into situations that they're just simply not prepared for. And the tech world is a great example of this, where I'm a real big believer in co-leadership and having SME expertise and then also sort of what I would call kind of the human, the emotional expert, so to speak. And in that space of co-leadership, there's an alignment and a collaboration between those two people to make that team really truly function. But the SME isn't necessarily going to be required to be there and be emotionally responsive to everything that's going on with that team because they just simply may not have those leadership skills. And people often confuse oh, well, this person's been doing this job for 10 or 15 years and they're great at this job, so let's make them a manager and give them a team of 12 people. And within a year, they've left the job because at the end of the day, that level of stress, one, they're not ready for it. They aren't usually given any sort of real training to how to deal with the different, multitude of issues that are going to come up with individuals, and how to coach them, how to mentor them, and what leadership really looks like above and beyond just simply getting the job done. And so I don't blame people if they can't do the job, but I do think I do blame the system, because I do think the system has cut a lot of corners and made a lot of really bad decisions for, again, prioritizing the wrong values. And it's coming back to bite us. We're becoming, I think, less innovative. I think our organizations are becoming less collaborative, less creative. We have a lot more turnover. So we're losing a lot of like wisdom, where you used to have people in organizations that would be there for a period of time and really, develop the wisdom of the brand and the company. And now, you have turnover every 18 months to 2.5 years of a variety of different people. How do you build a culture around that? And how do you really create like a strong, sustainable brand that has value and means something to the consumer? And so I think those are the challenges that like today's companies are dealing with, because of some of these like legacy issues that come from us not taking leadership seriously, looking at the wrong leadership styles, and allowing too much toxic behavior to just sort of flourish, for, again, the wrong reasons.
Yeah, I actually witnessed you talk about people being promoted that really didn't want to be promoted. This poor guy I worked with, he was a magnificent programmer. He programmed on the mainframe, and he knew every single thing you had to know about the programming and the operations of a mainframe environment. And we had a huge mainframe environment. And they promoted him to a manager. And he didn't ask for it. They just said, we're going to put you in charge of this group over here, put him in charge of the group. And he didn't last 4 or 5 months, and just begged to get out, because management didn't really care about who they had. They just needed a widget to plug in. They would needed a square peg to plug into a round hole, basically, is what they were doing. And that's what happened. And you see that happening. It's a failure of leadership when they just don't care about getting the right person.
I agree absolutely. And I would positively say, like, a good leader could literally lead any type of team, regardless of the team's expertise. I truly, having the expertise absolutely gives you deeper understanding into what your team is experiencing and going through. But I have been a senior marketing executive, where my team of 25 or so people all had skill sets I did not have. I mean, I absolutely had to hire skill sets that were not mine, that I had no expertise in, but I had expertise in understanding the need of the job, the resource requirement, and I understood the needs of those skills. But those people were the subject matter experts without question. And there was nothing I was going to do to over subject matter expert that person. I needed them to be involved in the overall project and the mission of the job. I needed them to be committed to what we were doing as a team. And then I needed them to bring their individual expertise and hopefully like really rise and exceed what they even think, is possible of themselves. Because that's always my goal, is like to help those types of people elevate. But to your point of this guy that gets promoted, the guy that gets pushed into the round hole when he's a square peg, our corporate capitalistic system doesn't have a growth path for that subject matter expert, really. It's like, that's because what happens is, they do it for so long, and it's like, well, we can't really promote him anymore. He's already a senior level for this. So the only way we can give this person more money, or the only way that we can, expand this environment or whatever, is to put people underneath them. And that right there, I think, kills or damages at least a lot of careers. I think a lot of people, we talk about like the Peter Principle. And I think sometimes the Peter Principle is simply like, you're extremely good at your job, but nobody's actually taught you how to be a leader. And it doesn't really have anything to do. It's like, these are skills that can be learned. Not everybody wants to learn them. And I think that's okay. I totally think it's okay. Like, leadership in and of itself is you put yourself out there. It is a lot of hard work. Not everybody likes you. It can be very lonely. there's a lot of things about leadership that, on the surface, it looks, really, really cool, but on the back end, it has its own frustrations. It's just like everything else. But I think the way that our corporate system functions, we don't allow people to grow the way that they really can. Like we stunt growth instead of really like nurturing it.
Yeah, the person I was telling you about, uh, by them making that move of taking this extremely talented person and pushing them into management, they disabled they impacted negatively the whole operation of what the systems this guy had been running, because he didn't have, there was no one equal to him.
He couldn't be replaced in what he was
He
doing.
he basically built all, he can manage it, and sure, but he didn't have anyone to do the things that he had been doing, which was keeping the whole thing afloat. And when you're working in something like a mainframe environment, it doesn't take much to crash the entire ship into the rocks. It's like one wrong move and you're dead.
And a situation like that, it really sounds like a situation where, and again, this is super common, where leaders, the C-suite, are very, 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 and then the board especially. I mean, depending on if you're a public company or not, and all of that, but however many layers you have in that sort of ivory tower, they're so disconnected from what's happening on the ground, and they will make these decisions without really going into their environments and really understanding the culture that they're managing, the culture that they've created. And I think it's very, it's irresponsible, in a lot of ways to function that way. And it, to your point, it impacts so many things. It impacts people's lives. It impacts trust. It impacts the function of the business itself, which by nature continues to impact people's lives. Because if the business starts to decline, then you have layoffs. Then you have issues where you have to start letting people go, or restructuring, or putting more work onto people that are already overstressed. And so no matter what, that toxicity just keeps cycling into itself, and it becomes, wholly unsustainable over time.
Well, one thing we've been seeing recently is criminality in management. Some of these really horrendous. It's like I keep reading these headlines like, what in the world? Someone invested in this moron, and you have all these people whose lives have been pretty much washed away by somebody who just wanted to have a big yacht and a big mansion and buy a lot of designer clothes on the company check, and it just keeps happening over and over. And I would love to have those things, but it never has occurred to me that I would want to go in and take company money. And for one thing, I don't want to go to jail. I've seen what happens to people in prison, and there's so much of this still going on, and there's a lot of these guys, these operators, and the corporate world that continue to get away with this sort of stuff because it's the deal of I'm too important, I'm too big to arrest, and that's
one of the
a lot.
One of the movies that it just annoys me. It annoys me that it's a movie. It annoys me that it gets glorified. It annoys me. And it's like, I believe that people can overcome themselves or what have you, but it's The Wolf of Wall Street. I really cannot stand that movie. I really can't stand what it's about. I can't, that it's like, great, this guy took his experience and he's opportunistic and he's able to turn it into a book and a story and maybe inspire some other people, but to what end? And what's being glorified in that whole entire story. And it's just really excessive greed. And again, if we go back to energy, which is sort of where we started, it's very low vibration. It's just very, very, very for me, I feel like I've been in those types of environments, and I have been very much in those types of environments. And you literally feel sick in those spaces. It doesn't feel good. And I don't think the people that are having those experiences sort of really feel as fulfilled as they want us to believe. I think they actually probably have a pretty wide gaping black hole somewhere in their soul that they are trying to fill up with yachts and clothes and, a lack of integrity to just steal and take from others, as opposed to, participating and being a part of something and actually being productive and creating, and I think, again, a lot of this is cultural. It's things we've tolerated as a society because we all want that yacht, right? We all want that. We all want that cool gig. We all want to be that billionaire, and we're all told that we can be. But the reality for the vast majority of us is that's simply not the truth. And I would question, frankly, like, do we really need that at all? Like, does any one human really truly need that? Is that really truly fulfilling? I don't have a problem with money. As a matter of fact, I very much enjoy making money and very much enjoy using money. It's a wonderful tool of transaction. But I'm not a hoarder. And I think that that's an interesting thing to look at when we talk about the psychology around people who hoard money, just like people who hoard anything. We have an entire TV series where we look at and judge individual humans for the possessions that they hoard in a consumeristic, capitalistic environment that tells them that all of those items are going to fulfill them and take care of their emotional needs. And yet we do not do that about people who hoard money. So I just think that that's an interesting thing to consider in terms of why we judge one thing but not another.
Yeah,
You're still hoarding.
Yeah, I watched the impact of some of these greed merchants. I think it was 1987. I was in downtown Oakland, and one of the big investment companies had gone out of business, and they suddenly just shut down. And their office was just right around the corner for where I worked. And I walked over there, and their office just had a big sign, closed. And that's all it said. And there were all these people that used to work there who that was their way of finding out that they no longer had a job. And I watched it, made me sad to watch something like that. It's one thing to, be called into the boss and, for whatever reason, you're laid off or you're fired or whatever. Do it in person, but to put up a sign that just says closed, no explanation, and they have to wait until they hear on the news that that company is gone.
It's what you're describing. It's like we've heard so much in the last year. There was that trend of quiet quitting that kept getting brought up. And I was thinking, like, why is this a big deal? Because have we not been doing quiet layoffs for like ever? Forever? Has there not been a Friday afternoon where 40 people get walked into a room and are told, hey, you're not coming back on Monday? And nobody gets to say goodbye and everybody just disappears, or, it's like, and so this is, again, this is how we've conditioned people. We created a culture of quiet layoffs. Why would we be surprised if people started quiet quitting? It's literally what they were taught to do. And I laugh every time somebody complains about it. I'm just sort of like, wow, you're just like, phew, you want everything to be like, like whatever. I mean, it doesn't make sense to me that we don't make these logical conclusions, and that again goes back to why it's unsustainable. The culture of quiet layoffs was really not any more sustainable than the culture of quiet quitting.
Yeah, I remember, when I was doing the IT work that, there were a lot of layoffs and people feared Friday. Friday massacres were a regular thing, especially when they started offshoring. And that was just, it was horrible. I would go in on a Friday and go, damn, maybe I'm next. Maybe she's next. Maybe he's next. All my friends were starting to go away. We'd come in on a Friday, and Friday evening, they were no longer there. They had been given their box to put their little bits of their life in and send them home.
I won't speak the name of the organization, but not too long ago, there was an organization that did a fairly large layoff. It was, for the size of the company, it was a fairly large layoff. And they didn't hide what was coming. They let everybody know pretty well in advance that layoffs were coming and gave them a heads up. They brought in career counselors. They helped redeploy people into positions even before the layoffs came. They approached it from a value-based perspective. They valued people. The layoffs were necessary. Business is business. It's like the ideal of like having a value aligned business isn't like, oh, let's just all, like have lollipops and bubbles and we're all going to have fun and play. It's like, no, we're still in business and you have to pay bills and you have to pay, salaries and you have to have operational money to run, but you can do something with integrity or without integrity, period.
Yeah, I've experienced or I watched what happened to these groups, these businesses that they were so laid back that they forgot to do business. And my group took over. Our group bought from Oracle the PeopleSoft headquarters in Pleasanton, California. PeopleSoft was big. They were.
I remember PeopleSoft, and I know.
This campus, they had volleyball courts and basketball courts and jogging tracks, and they had gourmet. The food was great, but they never got any work done.
They never put out a product.
It's like, dude, don't play volleyball. Go and make us some.
But, that's a different type of lack of leadership as well, right? Yeah. I mean, it really still comes back to, discipline is it. I absolutely, discipline is critical, and there has to be that balance, but we have to treat each other like we're humans, because we are, and we're functioning together in these environments, and we're going to function better, be way more productive, and actually enjoy our lives more. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with that. I don't think that should and if that costs like a couple of percentage points off of a bottom line that can handle it, especially like one that can really take that, like why can we not shift those values a little bit and just align things more? I think that it is very possible and necessary.
I agree. Well, we've got about 3 minutes left. And as the corporate mystic, our official corporate mystic, give us some long-term goals from Europe. Give us a mystical prediction of where we should be headed in the world of business. Just, kind of high level.
Yeah, I think that unions are important, but I don't think that they necessarily make sense in every environment. But I think we need to definitely be looking at employee advocacy. I think HR has been sort of demonized and put in a very terrible position in the corporate world where they're regulatory and their job is to protect the company, but they're also responsible for recruiting and making sure that everybody shows up to the company picnic. So it's really confusing for employees. And a lot of times, employees feel like they're getting advocacy through HR and they end up sitting on the opposite side of the table. So I think that that's one big thing that needs to shift, is we need to recognize that there has to be an employee advocacy space that has the ability to be neutral enough to the business to really allow to, really truly mediate these issues and not just necessarily because we're creating a level of distrust within our workers community that is going to cripple us at a corporate level. It is just simply going to cripple us if we don't stop what we're doing. And I think the other thing, going back to what we were talking about with subject matter experts and leadership and, making sure that people are really prepared for that role of leadership, is we need to look at leadership differently. We need to start really incorporating active leadership training, and we need to recognize the people who are leading from within the organization at any level and give them the opportunity to rise regardless of what their actual skill set is. I can't hear you.
And there we are.
There we are.
We're almost at the end of our time.
Yes.
I know you were so quiet, John.
Well, I was just listening.
I enjoyed the discussion because you have made a lot of good points that hopefully your customers will benefit from that, because it's a lot of wise advice that you have for people, and I look forward to your continued corporate mysticism around here.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate both of y'all so much. And
thank
love
you.
Plutopia. Love Plutopia.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, well, we'll be back next week. Yeah, I think we're back next week, but there's the week around Christmas, we weren't gonna do this. So
Very good. Well, good night, folks.
all right.
Bye, everybody.
Adios.